25. That was the number of bodies Renly Abbott counted in the snow. 25 massive, shivering beasts dying on her porch in the middle of the worst blizzard Oregon had seen in a decade. She didn't know they were the Royal Guard. She didn't know they were being hunted. And she certainly didn't know that by dragging them inside and burning her own furniture to keep them alive, she was declaring war on the underworld. Renly thought she was just saving wolves. But when the black SUVs pulled up the next morning, she realized she had just saved the Lycan King's entire family. And now she was his problem to solve. The thermometer on the porch of the rusted A-frame cabin read 20 degrees below zero. Renly Abbott pressed her hand against the frosted glass, feeling the bite of the cold seep through the pane. Outside Blackwood Ridge was disappearing. The Oregon wilderness, usually a tapestry of deep greens and browns, had been erased by a whiteout blizzard that the weathermen in Portland were calling the Widowmaker. Renly adjusted the collar of her frayed wool sweater. She was 24, but her hands looked older, chapped scarred from chopping wood and trembling slightly from a lack of protein. She was an Omega, technically, but to the world, she was just Ren. A runaway, a ghost, a woman who had chosen the brutal silence of the mountains over the suffocating cruelty of the packs in the city. She turned away from the window, intending to stoke the dying fire in her wood stove when she heard it. It wasn't the wind. The wind screamed. This sound whimpered. It was a low, guttural sound of distress that cut through the gale. Renly froze. Her wolf, a dormant, tiny thing deep in her chest, stirred for the first time in months. Help them. Renly grabbed her heavy parka and the shotgun she kept behind the door, not for wolves, but for men. She shoved her feet into unlaced boots and threw open the heavy oak door. The wind hit her like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. Snow blinded her instantly. But she pushed forward, stepping off the porch and sinking waist-deep into a drift. "Hello," she screamed, her voice snatched away by the storm. She stumbled over something hard, a log number. It was warm. Fur. Renly fell to her knees, frantically digging through the snow. Black fur. Massive paws. It was a wolf, a timber wolf by the size of it, but larger than any natural animal. It was motionless, its breathing shallow and rattling. Then she looked up. They were everywhere. Scattered across her front yard like fallen soldiers were wolves. Black, grey, russet, white. They were huddled together in piles covered in ice, slowly freezing to death. She counted quickly, panic rising in her throat. 10, 15, 25. This wasn't a pack hunting. This was a massacre in slow motion. They were too weak to move their limbs, stiff with hypothermia. "Get up, Poe!" Renly shouted, grabbing the scruff of the black wolf nearest to her. "You have to get up. You're going to die." The wolf opened one eye. It was a shocking molten gold. Intelligence flashed there. Human intelligence. These were shifters, and not just any shifters. The sheer size of them indicated high blood. Alphas, betas. They were dying on her doorstep. If she left them, they would be dead by midnight. If she brought them in, she was risking everything. An Omega hiding from the registry had no business interacting with a pack this size. If they were hostile, they would kill her the moment they thawed. "Let them die," her fear whispered. "Save them," her soul demanded. Renly cursed aloud, a sharp, ugly sound in the wind. She grabbed the black wolf's front paws and hauled him backward. He was dead weight, easily 200 pounds. She grunted, her boots slipping on the ice as she dragged him up the stairs and into the cabin. She went back out. Again. And again. For 3 hours, Renly Abbott waged war against the winter. Her fingers turned blue, then white. Her lungs burned. She dragged 25 massive bodies into her small, open-plan living room. She had to shove her sofa against the wall stack, her chairs on the kitchen table, and clear every inch of floor space. By the time the last one, a smaller, silver-furred female, was inside, Renly collapsed by the door, vomiting bile from sheer exhaustion. The cabin smelled of wet fur ozone and the coppery tang of blood. The floor was a carpet of heaving, shivering beasts. She crawled toward the wood stove. The wood box was empty. She had enough firewood outside for 2 days, but the storm was burying it. She looked at the wolves. They were still shivering violently. The ambient heat wasn't enough. Renly looked at her dining chairs. They were oak, hand-carved, the only thing of value she had left from her mother. She stood up, her legs shaking, grabbed the axe from the corner, and smashed the first chair into splinters. She fed the fire. The room began to glow orange, and Renly Abbott sat on the floor, surrounded by 25 apex predators, and prayed she hadn't just invited the devil into her home. The night stretched out like a blade. Renly didn't sleep. She couldn't. She moved among the bodies like a battlefield nurse. She boiled snow for water in her largest pots and used a turkey baster to force warm fluids down the throats of the ones who couldn't lift their heads. She noticed things as she worked. These weren't rogue wolves. Their coats were groomed despite the ice. Their muscles were dense, honed by training, not starvation. Many of them had scars, tactical scars from blades and bullets, not from fighting over carcasses in the woods. And they were injured. Not by the storm, but by something else. As she tended to a massive russet male near the kitchen island, she smelled it. A sweet, sickly scent oozing from a gash on his flank. Wolfsbane, but modified, synthetic. "Who did this to you?" she whispered, wiping the wound with a warm cloth. The wolf whined a sound of pure agony. She needed to dilute the poison. She went to her pantry. She was poor, dirt poor. Her shelves held 3 cans of beans, a bag of rice, and 5 pounds of venison she had salted for the deep winter. It was supposed to last her until March. It was currently January. She pulled the venison down. She cut it into strips, searing them lightly on the cast iron atop the stove to release the scent of meat and fat. The smell woke them. One by one, heads lifted. Eyes opened. Blue, green, gold, brown. 25 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The tension in the room spiked. The air grew heavy with the pressure of alpha pheromones. Renly swallowed hard, keeping her movements slow. She was an omega. Her instinct was to bare her neck and submit. But this was her house. "I don't have much," she said, her voice raspy. "But it's protein. Eat." She tossed the strips to them. They didn't fight. They didn't snarl. They ate with a disciplined, desperate hunger. They left the pieces for the weakest among them. Military, she realized. This is a unit. She sat back against the hearth, her back to the fire, exhausted. Her eyes met the gaze of the black wolf she had dragged in first. He was awake. He hadn't eaten. He was watching her. He was the biggest of them all, taking up the entire space in front of the door. His eyes were the color of liquid mercury. Silver. Intelligent. Calculating. He wasn't just watching her movements. He was watching her intent. He tried to shift his weight, and a low growl of pain rumbled in his chest. His leg was badly twisted. "Don't," Renly said, holding up a hand. "You're safe here. The door is bolted. The storm is burying us. No one is coming for you tonight." The wolf huffed a sound that sounded suspiciously like a scoff. Renly crawled over to him. The other wolves stiffened a collective ripple of tension. The black wolf chuffed once, a sharp command, and the others settled down. The leader. Renly reached out her hand, hovering over his massive head. "I'm going to check your leg. Don't bite me. I taste terrible." The wolf's silver eyes narrowed, but he didn't pull away. She touched his fur. It was softer than it looked, thick and luxurious. Beneath the coat, his body was burning up. Fever. "You're fighting the poison," she murmured. She rested her forehead against his flank for a second, just to feel the heat. It had been 3 years since she had touched another living being. The contact made her chest ache with a sudden, overwhelming loneliness. "I don't know who you are," she whispered to the wolf, assuming he was too feverish to understand. "And I don't care. I'm just glad. I'm just glad I'm not dying alone in this house." The black wolf went still. He leaned his head forward, pressing his wet nose against her neck. It wasn't a threat. It was an acknowledgement. A thank you. Renly closed her eyes and let a single tear leak out. She fell asleep there, curled up against the leader of the pack, protected by the very monsters she was supposed to fear. When Renly woke, the cold was back. She sat up with a gasp, reaching for the shotgun. The fire was dead ash. The light coming through the window was the harsh, blinding grey of a snow-buried morning, and the room was empty. The floor was scratched. The smell of wet dog lingered. But the 25 wolves were gone. Renly scrambled to her feet, running to the door. She threw it open. The storm had broken. The world was a sculpture of pristine white silence. There were tracks, heavy, deep tracks, leading off the porch and disappearing into the dense tree line to the east. They had left, without a sound, without a goodbye. She slumped against the door frame, a hollow feeling carving out her stomach. She looked at her empty pantry, her smashed dining chairs, her blood-stained floor. She had given them everything she had, and they had vanished. "Of course," she laughed bitterly, the sound brittle in the icy air. "What did you expect, Ren A thank you card?" She turned to go back inside, planning to salvage the wood from the rest of the chairs to keep from freezing when the ground vibrated. It started as a low hum, then grew into roar. Engines. Big ones. Renly grabbed the shotgun again, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hunters. The ones who had poisoned the wolves. They had tracked them here. She stepped out onto the porch, raising the weapon. A convoy of vehicles crested the ridge. These weren't the beat-up pickup trucks of local poachers. They were matte black armored SUVs, the kind used by private military contractors or high-level government officials. They had snow chains on their tires that churned the earth. 1, 2, 5 vehicles. They skidded to a halt in her front yard, surrounding her cabin in a semicircle. Renly didn't lower the gun. "Get off my land!" she screamed, though she knew the buckshot in her gun wouldn't dent the armored glass. The doors of the lead vehicle opened. Men poured out. They were dressed in tactical black gear, not camouflage. They moved with the same fluid, predatory grace as the wolves from the night before. They held assault rifles, but they didn't raise them. They stood at attention. Then the rear door of the second SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, over 6'4", wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that cost more than Renly's entire life. He wore no coat, seemingly immune to the freezing temperature. His hair was dark, wind-blown. His face was sharp angles and brutal beauty, a face that belonged on a magazine cover or a wanted poster. But it was his eyes that made Renly's breath hitch. Silver. Liquid mercury. He walked toward the porch, his boots crunching on the snow. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at her. He looked at the blood on her sweater. He looked at the dark circles under her eyes. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The air between them crackled electric and heavy. "Renly Abbott," he said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated in her bones. It wasn't a question. "Who asks?" she snapped, tightening her grip on the trigger. The man took a step up. Then another. He stopped until the barrel of her shotgun was inches from his chest. He reached up, wrapped his hand around the barrel, and gently, effortlessly pushed it down. "I am Kieran Sterling," he said. "Alpha of the Sterling Monroe Pack, and King of the Western Lycans." Renly's blood ran cold. The Sterling Monroe, the royal family, the most ruthless, powerful dynasty in the shifter world. You were the wolf," she whispered, the realization hitting her like a train. The Black Wolf. Kieran didn't smile. His expression was intense, possessive, and terrifyingly serious. "My royal guard was ambushed," Kieran said, his eyes scanning her face as if memorizing it. "Sabotaged by a traitor in my own court. We were paralyzed, dying. You didn't just open your door to strays, Renly. You sheltered the crown." He took a step closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and the wild scent of the forest. "My men tell me you burned your furniture to keep them warm, that you fed them your winter store." "I did what I had to do," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Now are you going to pay me back, or are you going to arrest me for being an unregistered Omega?" Kieran's eyes darkened. He reached out his thumb, brushing the smudge of soot on her cheek. The touch was scorching hot. "Arrest you?" Kieran let out a dark, low laugh that sent shivers down her spine. "No, Renly. I'm not here to arrest you." He gestured to the SUVs behind him. "Pack your things." "Excuse me." "You saved my life. You saved my brother's life. You have a target on your back now because of it. The people who tried to kill us will come here next to see who interfered." He leaned in his lips, brushing her ear. "You aren't staying in this shack another minute. You're coming with me to the Citadel." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Renly argued, panic rising. "I'm nobody. I'm just—" "You are the woman who brought the Wolf King to his knees," Kieran interrupted, pulling back to look her in the eye. "And starting today, you are under my personal protection." He turned to his men. "Load her up. Burn the cabin." "What?" Renly screamed, trying to shove past him. "You can't burn my home. It's already compromised," Kieran said coldly, grabbing her arm to stop her. "And you won't need it anymore." "Why?" she demanded, tears springing to her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Kieran looked at her, and for a second, the mask of the king slipped, revealing the raw, primal wolf beneath. "Because," he growled softly, "when you fell asleep against me last night, the silence in my head finally stopped. You're coming with me, Ren, even if I have to carry you." The sound of the explosion cracked the frozen air like a whip. Renly screamed, lunging forward as the windows of her A-frame cabin blew out, spewing orange flames against the white snow. The heat hit her face instantly, searing away the tears on her cheeks. "My things!" she cried, thrashing against the arm that held her. "My mother's journals." "The photos, gone," Kieran Sterling said. His voice was devoid of pity, hard as granite. He didn't struggle to hold her. His grip on her waist was an iron band. Material things can be replaced. Your life cannot. You have no right. Renly turned on him, hammering her fists against his chest. It was like hitting a wall of muscle beneath the bespoke suit. That was my home. It was all I had. Kieran looked down at her. The flames reflected in his silver eyes, making them look like pools of molten lead. He didn't flinch at her blows. He just waited until she ran out of breath, her chest heaving, her small frame trembling with a mix of rage and hypothermic shock. It wasn't a home, Renly, he said, low and rough. It was a grave you were slowly freezing to death in. I just accelerated the timeline. He signaled to one of the guards, a massive scar-faced man named Barrett. Get her in the lead vehicle. The heat is already on. If she fights, sedate her. But do not hurt her. I don't need sedation, Renly spat, pulling away from him. And I'm not getting in your car. Kieran stepped into her personal space again, that overwhelming scent of ozone and alpha power flooding her senses. He tipped her chin up with a gloved finger. The men who poisoned my pack are less than 10 miles out. He murmured, his voice silky and dangerous. They are tracking the magical signature of the poison. They will be here in 20 minutes. If you stay, they will peel the skin from your bones to find out where I went. Get in the car. The threat wasn't a bluff. Renly saw the truth of it in the grim set of his jaw. She looked back at her burning cabin, the sparks rising into the grey sky like fireflies, and swallowed her grief. Survival first, mourning later. She turned and marched toward the massive armored Cadillac Escalade. The interior of the SUV was a different world. It smelled of rich leather and expensive scotch. The silence was absolute. The armored glass cut out the roar of the fire and the wind completely. Renly sat on the edge of the plush leather seat, clutching her knees. She was still wearing her blood-stained sweater and dirty jeans, a stark contrast to the pristine interior. The door opened, and Kieran slid in beside her. The space instantly shrank. He was too big, too intense. He pulled a crystal decanter from a hidden compartment and poured a measure of amber liquid into a glass. "Drink," he ordered, holding it out. "I don't drink," she muttered. "It's not for fun. It's for the shock. Drink." She took it, her hands shaking, and downed it in one gulp. It burned all the way down, settling in her stomach like a hot coal. The convoy began to move. Renly watched through the tinted window as the burning remains of her life disappeared around a bend in the logging road. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Seattle," Kieran answered, looking at a tablet that had lit up in his hands. He was already shifting back into king mode, reviewing maps and troop movements. "The Sterling Estate. Seattle is 4 hours away. We'll be there in 2. We're taking the private route." Renly studied his profile. He was devastatingly handsome, in a cruel, sharp way. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and that thick, dark hair. But there was a heaviness to him, a weight on his shoulders that seemed to crush the air around him. "The wolves," she said quietly. "The ones I saved, are they okay?" Kieran paused. His fingers stopped moving on the screen. He turned to look at her, and for the first time his expression softened by a fraction. "They are in the transport trucks behind us. My brother Silas is stable. The others are weak but alive. Because of you." "Silas," she repeated. "The russet wolf, the one with the flank wound." "Yes. My second in command." My only blood family. Kieran's eyes narrowed. The poison used was a synthetic blend of wolfsbane and silver nitrate, specifically designed to halt regeneration. It's a slow, agonizing death. It's a weapon made by the Vanguard. The Vanguard? Renly frowned. I thought they were a myth. Extremists. They are very real, Kieran said darkly. And they have infiltrated the council. We were on our way to a peace summit when they hit our tires with spike strips laced with the toxin. We crashed. We were forced to shift to survive the cold, but the poison made us sluggish. If we hadn't found your cabin, if you hadn't dragged us inside. He stopped. He reached out his hand, hovering over her knee, then retreating. Why did you do it, Renly? You're an Omega. Your instinct should have been to run from 25 alphas, to hide. Renly looked down at her scarred hands. I know what it's like to be hunted, she whispered. I know what it's like to be cold and in pain, and have everyone walk past you. I couldn't be the person who walked past. Kieran stared at her for a long time. The silence stretched thick with unspoken tension. You aren't a runaway, he said suddenly. You're a cast-off. Renly flinched. The word was a slap. I see the mark on your neck. Kieran said, his gaze dropping to the faint, jagged scar just below her ear. Someone bit you. Someone claimed you. And then they rejected you. Renly pulled her collar up her face, burning with shame. It doesn't matter. It matters, Kieran growled, a low rumble that vibrated the seats. Because a rejected Omega usually dies within a year from the heartbreak. The bond break shatters the soul. Yet here you are, 3 years later, living alone in the harshest winter in a decade, fighting God and nature. He leaned in closer, his silver eyes piercing her. Who was he? It doesn't matter. She snapped, tears stinging her eyes again. Who was the fool who threw away a woman with the heart of a lion? His name was Varric. She whispered the name, tasting like ash in her mouth. Varric Thorn. Kieran went rigid. The glass in his hand cracked, a spiderweb fracture appearing in the crystal. Varric Thorn. Kieran repeated, his voice deadly quiet. The Alpha of the Iron Claw Pack. The current head of the Vanguard. Renly's eyes went wide. He runs the Vanguard. Kieran laughed, a dark, humorless sound. Fate has a twisted sense of humor, little bird. The man who broke you is the same man trying to kill me. He tossed the cracked glass aside and leaned back, a predatory gleam entering his eyes. You are not just a guest anymore, Renly. You are the key to winning this war. 2 hours later, the convoy swept through massive iron gates that bore the crest of a howling wolf crowned in silver. The Sterling estate was not a house. It was a citadel, perched on a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound. It was a sprawling fortress of steel glass and dark stone. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter with military precision. The SUV stopped in a circular driveway that could fit a commercial airliner. Stay close to me, Kieran commanded as the door opened. Do not look down. Do not cower. You are with the king. You act like it. Renly stepped out, her legs stiff. The wind here was salty and damp, unlike the dry freeze of the mountains. The front door's massive double slabs of mahogany swung open. A line of staff stood waiting. But Renly didn't see them. Her eyes were drawn to the woman standing at the center of the grand foyer. She was beautiful in a way that made your teeth ache. Tall blonde, wearing a white silk dress that cost more than Renly's cabin. Her scent hit Renly from 20 feet away, vanilla and heavy musk. a high-ranking she-wolf. "Kieran!" The woman rushed forward, her heels clicking on the marble. She threw her arms around Kieran's neck, burying her face in his chest. "Oh, thank the goddess." We heard the convoy was hit. We thought. Kieran didn't hug her back. He stood stiffly, his hands at his sides. "I'm fine, Vivian," he said, peeling her arms off him. "Where is the medic team? Silas needs immediate attention." "They're in the East Wing," Vivian said, stepping back. Her eyes, a piercing, icy blue, finally slid past Kieran and landed on Renly. The smile vanished. Her face twisted into a mask of confusion and disgust. "Kieran," Vivian said slowly, her voice sharpening. "Who is this? Why is there a dirty stray in the main hall?" Renly shrank back slightly, the shame of her appearance crashing down on her. She looked like a beggar next to this queen. "This is Renly Abbott," Kieran said, his voice booming through the hall. He stepped to the side, placing a possessive hand on the small of Renly's back, pushing her forward. "She saved my life. She saved Silas. She is under my personal protection." Vivian's eyes narrowed on Kieran's hand. She saw the protectiveness. She smelled the mingled scents. His scent was all over the girl. "Protection." Vivian laughed lightly, but it was brittle. "Darling, we have guest quarters for charity cases in the servants' annex. I'll have the housekeeper find her some old clothes and—" "No," Kieran cut her off. "She stays in the royal wing." The entire hall went silent. The staff exchanged terrified glances. The royal wing was reserved for family. And mates. Vivian went pale. "The royal wing, Kieran, you can't be serious. That floor it's for us, for our future." "There is no us, Vivian," Kieran said, sounding tired. "We have discussed this. The arrangement with your father was political, and considering your father is currently under investigation for the security leak that nearly got me killed, I suggest you watch your tone." He looked down at Renly. "Come." He guided her past a stunned Vivian toward the grand staircase. As they passed, Renly felt the wave of hatred radiating from the blonde woman. It was physical, like heat from an open oven. "You're making a mistake," Vivian hissed as Renly passed. "He plays with toys, little wolf. But he only marries royalty. Don't get comfortable." Renly didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on the stairs, her heart pounding. Kieran led her to a set of double doors on the 3rd floor. He pushed them open. The room was larger than her entire cabin. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the stormy ocean. A king-sized bed with velvet canopies dominated the center. A fireplace roared with gas flames. "My room is through that connecting door," Kieran said, pointing to a door on the left. "If you need anything at all, you open it. You do not ask the staff. You ask me." Renly walked into the room, feeling the softness of the carpet under her boots. She turned to face him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The royal wing. You're using me to piss her off, aren't you?" Kieran closed the door, locking them in. He walked toward her, shedding his suit jacket and tossing it onto a chair. He began to unbutton his dress shirt, revealing the bandages wrapped around his torso, where the poison had seeped in. "Vivian is a leech," Kieran said flatly. "But I'm not using you to hurt her. I'm keeping you here because it's the only place I can smell you." "Smell me." "The storm," he said, taking a step closer. "When we were in the cabin, when I was dying, the pain was unbearable, like fire in my veins. But when you touched me, the pain stopped. When I smell you, the wolf in my head, the one that wants to tear the world apart, goes to sleep." He stopped inches from her. He reached out and traced the line of her jaw. "I don't know what you are, Renly Abbott. You're a rejected Omega with no pack, but you have a power over me that I don't understand. And until I figure out what it is," he leaned down, his lips brushing her forehead, "you belong to the king." A knock on the door shattered the moment. "Enter," Kieran growled, pulling back but not moving away from Renly. The door opened, and a man in a white coat entered the royal doctor. But behind him, limping heavily, was the russet wolf. Silas. Silas looked like a younger, rougher version of Kieran. He had messy brown hair and a charming, crooked grin, though his face was pale from the poison. "I told you to stay in bed, brother," Kieran warned. "And miss the show." Silas hobbled into the room, eyeing Renly with wide, curious eyes. So this is her, the Angel of the Ice. Silas walked right up to Renly, and to her, shock dropped to one knee. He took her scarred hand and pressed it to his forehead, a gesture of supreme submission and gratitude. "Thank you," Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I heard what you did. You burned your mother's chair to keep me warm. I owe you a life debt, Renly. If you ever need to bury a body, you call me." Renly blinked, surprised by the warmth. You're welcome." Silas stood up, wincing, and looked at Kieran. The humor vanished from his face. "Kieran, we have a problem." "What is it?" "The toxicology report came back on the poison," Silas said, glancing at Renly nervously. "It's not just Vanguard tech. The chemical signature, Kieran, it matches the supply from the Abbott Pharmaceutical Labs." Kieran froze. He turned slowly to look at Renly. "Abbott," Kieran repeated. Renly felt the blood drain from her face. "Renly Abbott," Silas said softly. "Kieran. She's not just a random Omega. She's the runaway daughter of General Marcus Abbott, the man who supplies the Vanguard with their weapons." The silence in the room was deafening. Kieran took a step back from her, the warmth in his silver eyes instantly freezing over. The trust that had been building shattered in a heartbeat. "Is this true?" Kieran demanded, his voice dropping to a growl. "Is your father the one hunting us?" Renly backed up until her legs hit the bed. "I ran away," she cried. "I haven't seen him in 5 years. I hate him." "That's why I was hiding. Or maybe," Kieran said, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "You were planted there, the perfect trap, the innocent Omega in the woods waiting to finish the job if the crash didn't kill us." "No," Renly screamed. "I saved you." "Guard!" Kieran roared. The doors burst open. 2 armed guards rushed in. "She doesn't leave this room," Kieran commanded, not looking at her. "Lock the windows. Take her shoes. If she tries to shift, tranquilize her." "Kieran, please," Renly begged, reaching for him. He turned his back on her. "I thought you were a savior, Renly. Turns out you're just another soldier." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The lock clicked, echoing like a gunshot. Renly stood in the middle of the velvet-draped room, the luxury now a prison cell, as she realized the nightmare had only just begun. For 3 days, Renly Abbott existed in a gilded purgatory. The royal guest room was a fortress within a fortress. The windows were reinforced with steel shutters. The door was locked from the outside. Her meals were brought by a silent, terrified Omega maid who refused to make eye contact, sliding trays of gourmet food onto the floor before scurrying away. Renly didn't eat much. She spent her time pacing her mind, racing through every possibility. Kieran thought she was a spy. The general, her father, was the enemy. And somewhere out there, Veric Thorne, the man who had shattered her life 3 years ago, was hunting them. She wasn't safe. She was leverage. On the 4th night, the silence broke. The lock on her door clicked. It wasn't the rhythmic, heavy turn of a guard's key. It was the frantic scratching of a lockpick. Renly backed away from the door, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel. The door swung open. It wasn't Kieran. It was Vivian. The blonde socialite was dressed in black silk, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a suppressed pistol in her manicured hand. Behind her stood 2 guards wearing the sterling crest, but their eyes were glazed, their movements sluggish, compelled or bribed. "You're a persistent little rat," Vivian sneered, stepping into the room and closing the door softly. "Kieran is in the war room, debating whether to torture you or trade you. I thought I'd save him the trouble." Renly gripped the candlestick, her knuckles white. "If you kill me, he'll know it was you. The scent will be all over me." "Oh, I'm not going to kill you here." Vivian laughed, a cold, tinkling sound. "I'm going to escort you to the cliffs. A tragic suicide. The guilt of betraying the king was just too much for the poor, rejected Omega." She raised the gun. "Move! Now!" Renly calculated the distance. 10 feet. She couldn't outrun a bullet. She dropped the candlestick and raised her hands. "You're making a mistake," Renly said, walking slowly toward the door. "If I leave, the barrier falls." Vivian paused, frowning. "What are you talking about?" "My blood." Renly lied, her voice steady, despite her terror. "Kieran bonded me to the estate wards. If my heart stops, the perimeter alarms trigger instantly. You won't make it to the gate." It was a bluff, a desperate, stupid bluff. But Vivian hesitated. For a split second, the politician's daughter outweighed the killer. That was all Renly needed. She lunged, not at Vivian, but at the fire alarm pull station on the wall by the door. Click. Screech! The klaxons erupted. Red strobe lights flashed, blinding in the dim room. Vivian screamed in frustration and fired. The bullet went whoa, shattering a vase. Renly scrambled into the hallway, ducking under the arm of one of the dazed guards. "Stop her!" Vivian shrieked. Renly sprinted. She didn't know the layout of the citadel, but she followed the scent of ozone and rain, Kieran's scent. It was ingrained in her memory. She rounded a corner and collided with a wall of muscle. She bounced off, falling hard onto the marble floor. Before she could scramble up, a hand wrapped around her throat, pinning her to the ground. "Going somewhere?" It was Kieran. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His shirt was unbuttoned, his eyes wild and rimmed with red. He was radiating a killing aura, so potent it made the air taste like metal. "She tried to kill me," Renly gasped, clawing at his hand. "Vivian, she has a gun." Kieran looked up. Vivienne was rounding the corner, the gun now hidden in the folds of her dress, her face a mask of faux concern. "Kieran!" Vivian cried, breathless. "Thank God you caught her. I found her trying to escape. She attacked the guards." Kieran looked from Renly, pinned beneath him, to Vivian, standing pristine in the hallway. He loosened his grip on Renly's throat, but didn't let go. "Is that so?" Kieran asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Yes." Vivian stepped closer. "She's dangerous, Kieran. She's the general's daughter. You have to end this. Now." Kieran stared at Renly. His thumb brushed the pulse point on her neck. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm. Truth, truth, truth. He stood up, pulling Renly with him, tucking her behind his back. "Vivian," Kieran said softly. "You forgot to wipe the gun oil off your hands." Vivian froze. "And," Kieran continued, his eyes glowing a menacing silver, "Renly smells like fear. You smell like anticipation." "Kieran, you can't trust her. Get out of my sight!" Kieran roared, the sound shaking the paintings on the walls. "Before I forget that your father sits on the council and I rip your throat out right here." Vivian turned pale. She cast one last hateful look at Renly and fled. Kieran turned to Renly. He didn't apologize. He grabbed her arm and dragged her down the hall, not back to her room, but toward the heavy double doors at the end of the corridor. "Where are we going?" she asked, stumbling to keep up. "The dungeon," he growled, "because the time for lies is over. You're going to tell me everything, now." The dungeon was actually a high-tech containment unit in the basement of the Citadel. Kieran threw Renly into a chair and slammed his hands on the table on either side of her, boxing her in. "Start talking," he demanded. "Silas is getting worse. The poison is evolving. The doctors can't stop it. If he dies, I will burn the world down, starting with you." Renly looked into his desperate, furious eyes. She realized then that his anger wasn't hate, it was fear. He was terrified of losing his brother. "It's not just poison," Renly said quietly. "It's a biological agent. My father, General Abbott, he didn't just make weapons. He experimented on bloodlines." Kieran went still. "Explain." "I wasn't just his daughter," Renly whispered, the secret she had guarded for 3 years finally spilling out. "I was his control group. I was born without the ability to shift. But my blood carries a natural immunity to wolfsbane. He used me to test the toxins. He would inject me, watch me get sick, and then synthesize the antibodies from my blood to create the cure. That's why I ran. I wasn't a person to him. I was a blood bag." Kieran stared at her, horror dawning on his face. He looked at the scars on her arms, scars he had assumed were from living rough in the woods. They were needle tracks. "You're the antidote," Kieran breathed. "Yes. But not if you extract it. You have to. You have to filter it directly." She held out her wrist. "Take it. If you bite me, if you feed, your body will absorb the antibodies. You can transfer it to Silas through a pack link. If I feed on you," Kieran said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper, "I might kill you. An alpha in a state of distress. I won't be able to stop." "You have to," Renly said, her eyes fierce, "or your brother dies." Kieran hesitated. He looked at her neck, the pulse beating there. The desire to claim her, to bite her, had been driving him mad since the cabin. But to do it like this, to use her. "Sir." The intercom on the wall buzzed. It was Barrett, the head of security. "Status report," Kieran barked, not looking away from Renly. "We have a breach. The main gates are down. They used an EMP, sir. The electronics are fried. And, sir, it's the Vanguard. They have tanks." A massive explosion rocked the foundation of the house. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They're here," Renly whispered. "Varric." Kieran pulled a handgun from his waistband and checked the magazine. "Stay here. It's the safest room in the house." "No." Renly stood up. "They're here for me. If they find out I'm here, they'll tear this place apart. I can stop them." "You're an Omega who weighs 100 pounds soaking wet," Kieran snapped. "Sit down." "I know the override codes," she shouted. "The tanks my father built them. There's a manual kill switch on the frequency jammer. If I can get to the communication tower on the roof, I can disable their tech. Their weapons will lock up. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red mood lighting. Kieran looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. The same fire that had made her drag 25 wolves out of a blizzard. "Can you run?" he asked. "Try me." "Good." Kieran grabbed her hand. "Stick to me. If anyone other than me or Silas touches you, you kill them." He handed her a spare knife from his boot. They ran. The citadel was a war zone. Smoke filled the hallways. The sound of gunfire was deafening. Sterling guards were fighting hand to hand with vanguard mercenaries clad in grey tactical gear. They fought their way up the stairs. Kieran was a blur of lethal motion, tearing through enemies with claws and bullets. Renly stayed in his wake, using her small size to dodge debris. They reached the third-floor landing. The roof access was just ahead. Then the wall exploded. Renly was thrown backward, hitting the floor hard. Her ears rang. Through the dust, she saw a figure step through the hole in the wall. He was massive. He wore a long grey coat and held a serrated machete. His face was scarred, his smile twisted and cruel. Veric Thorn. "Well, well," Veric drawled, his voice like gravel grinding together. "Found my runaway bride." Kieran rose from the debris, shaking off the drywall dust. He placed himself between Veric and Renly. A low, vibrating growl started in his chest, so deep it rattled Renly's teeth. "Veric," Kieran said, "I was wondering when you'd show your ugly face." "King Kieran," Veric mocked. "You look tired, poison slowing you down." "I have enough left for you." Veric laughed and signaled. From the smoke behind him, 4 more vanguard soldiers stepped out. They were all shifting massive grey, genetically enhanced wolves. "Deal with the king," Veric ordered. "I'll take the girl." The 4 wolves lunged at Kieran. "Go!" Kieran roared at Renly. "Get to the roof!" Kieran met the charge head-on. He didn't shift, he didn't have the energy. He fought in human form using the knife and his unnatural speed. He was a whirlwind of violence, but he was outnumbered. Renly scrambled toward the stairs. Veric moved to intercept her, grabbing her by the hair. "Gotcha," he hissed. Renly didn't scream. She didn't beg. She remembered the knife Kieran had given her. She spun around, driving the blade down into Veric's thigh. He roared in pain and backhanded her. She flew across the hall, slamming into the wall. Pain exploded in her ribs. "You little bitch!" Veric snarled, limping toward her. "I'm going to chain you in the basement for a decade for that." He reached for her again. Suddenly, a russet blur tackled Veric from the side. Silas. He was in wolf form, smaller than usual, stumbling but fighting with the ferocity of a demon. He clamped his jaws onto Veric's arm. "Run, Renly." Silas's voice echoed in her mind through the pack link, a link she shouldn't have been able to hear. She didn't waste the chance. She scrambled up the final flight of stairs and burst onto the roof. The wind was howling. Below in the courtyard, the battle was raging. She saw the vanguard tanks lining up their turrets aiming at the main keep. She ran to the communications array, a satellite dish on the edge of the roof. She ripped open the panel. It was a mess of wires, but she knew the schematic. She had watched her father build the prototype. Blue wire. Ground the frequency. Bypass the firewall. Her hands shook. Below her, the sounds of fighting were getting closer. She found the manual override switch. She yanked the wires, sparking a connection, and slammed the switch down. A high-pitched screech emitted from the tower, blasting out across the estate. Down in the courtyard, the vanguard tanks suddenly ceased. Their turrets dropped. The electronic sights on the mercenaries' guns flickered and died. "Yes," Renly screamed, but then the roof door burst open. Veric was there, bleeding, limping, holding a limp, unconscious Silas by the throat. "Turn it back on," Veric commanded, holding a pistol to Silas's head. "Or the brother dies." The wind on the roof whipped Renly's hair across her face. She stood by the control panel, her chest heaving. "Let him go," she said. "Turn it off," Veric shouted, pressing the gun barrel into Silas's temple. Silas whimpered, too weak to fight back. Renly looked at the panel. If she turned it off, the tanks would level the citadel. Kieran would die. Everyone would die. If she didn't, Silas died. She looked past Veric into the shadows of the stairwell. She saw two silver eyes glowing in the dark. Kieran. He was covered in blood, his suit in tatters. He was creeping up behind Veric, silent as a shadow. He put a finger to his lips. He needed a distraction. Renly took a deep breath. She looked Veric in the eye. "You know, Veric," she said, her voice trembling but loud. "I never ran away because I was scared of you." Veric frowned, confused by the change in topic. "What? I ran away because you were boring." Veric's face twisted in rage. "You ungrateful!" He raised the gun to pistol whip her, taking the barrel off Silas's head for a fraction of a second. "Now!" Kieran launched himself. He didn't attack Veric's body. He attacked the arm holding the gun. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and the gun skittered across the roof. Veric howled and dropped Silas. He spun around, pulling a knife with his good hand. Kieran didn't dodge. He let Veric stab him in the shoulder so he could get close. He wrapped his hands around Veric's neck and slammed him backward into the communications tower. "This," Kieran snarled, his face inches from Veric's, "is for my brother." He headbutted Veric, breaking his nose. "This is for my pack." He punched him in the gut, lifting him off his feet. "And this," Kieran roared, his eyes flashing a brilliant, blinding white, "is for my mate." He threw Veric. Veric sailed over the edge of the roof. His scream faded as he plummeted 3 stories down, landing with a final thud on the concrete of the driveway below. Silence fell over the roof. Kieran stood there, swaying. The knife was still in his shoulder. He looked at Renly. "Mate," Renly whispered the word, hanging in the air. Kieran collapsed. "Kieran!" Renly rushed to him, sliding on her knees. She grabbed his face. He was burning up. The exertion, the wounds, the residual poison. It was too much. "Silas!" she yelled. The russet wolf dragged himself over, shifting back into human form. He was pale, but conscious. "He's crashing," Silas coughed. "His heart." "The antidote," Renly said. "He needs the antidote, now." She pulled her sleeve up. She looked at Kieran. His eyes were rolling back. "Kieran, listen to me," she commanded, slapping his cheek lightly. "You have to bite me. Do it." Kieran groaned, his consciousness fading. "No. Hurt. You won't hurt me. You're going to save us both." She pressed her wrist against his mouth. "Do it, Alpha." Instinct took over. Kieran's canines extended. He bit down. Renly cried out as his teeth pierced her skin. She felt the draw not just of blood, but of energy. It was intense, overwhelming. But then she felt something else, a golden thread of light connecting them. The bond. It snapped into place, solid and undeniable. She felt his pain, his fear, and then his strength. She felt the antibodies in her blood flooding his system. The heat in his body spiked, then cooled. His breathing deepened. The wound on his shoulder stopped bleeding, the skin knitting together before her eyes. He released her wrist and licked the wound closed. Kieran opened his eyes. The silver was gone. They were a deep, warm gold. He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her neck, inhaling deeply. "Mine," he growled. "You are mine. I will burn the world for you." Renly wrapped her arms around him, exhausted, bloody. But finally, home. "I know," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." 2 weeks later, the rebuilding of the Sterling Citadel was underway. The vanguard had retreated after Verrick's death. General Abbott had gone underground, a fugitive wanted by the council. The Great Hall was full. The entire Sterling Monroe pack, along with representatives from the neighboring territories, stood in silence. At the top of the grand staircase stood Kieran. He wore a formal black suit, the Sterling crest pinned to his lapel. He looked healthy, stronger than ever. Beside him stood Renly. She wasn't wearing rags. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet. Around her neck, covering the old scar of her rejection, was a collar of diamonds and sapphires, the royal courtship gift. Kieran stepped forward. "The council demanded I take a mate," he addressed the crowd. His voice was strong, echoing off the stone walls. "They demanded a political alliance. They demanded a pedigree." He looked at Vivian, who stood in the back of the crowd, disgraced and silent. "But a king does not need a pedigree," Kieran said. "He needs a partner. He needs a warrior. He needs a queen who would walk into a blizzard to save his life." He turned to Renly and took her hand. "I present to you Renly Abbott," Kieran announced. "My savior, my mate, and your queen." The silence held for a heartbeat. Then Silas, standing in the front row with his arm in a sling, began to clap. Then the guards. Then the pack. The roar of approval was deafening. Kieran leaned down, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know," he whispered, "being queen means you can't live in a shack anymore." Renly smiled, squeezing his hand. "As long as you're there, Kieran, I don't care where we live." He kissed her right there in front of the court, a promise sealed in blood and winter. The runaway Omega was gone. The Wolf Queen had risen, and that is how a rejected Omega brought the Lycan king to his knees and saved an Enhykira kingdom. From the frozen woods of Oregon to the throne of the Citadel, Renly proved that true power isn't about bloodline. It's about heart. If you loved this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think Kieran and Renly should do about her father, the general? Should there be a part 2 where they hunt him down? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a romance drama. Thanks for watching.